and begin to discuss these things.
Yeah.
Before we get really into all this stuff, we have to set our groundwork. We have to lay some foundation.
All right.
So Hebrews 2:7 talks about humans being created lower than the angels. Does it mean that angels are more valuable or that humans aren't valuable? It just means that there is some type of order.
Right. Some kind of hierarchy or some sort of structure.
Right.
With creation.
Right. So it's God being sovereign creator, angels being creation. They are not God. They are not on the same level as God. They answer to him. And on that tier, we would say is like Satan and his demons, because they were angels as well.
Right.
And they are not, God and Satan are not on the same level.
Yeah.
Satan is a created being, and he answers to God.
Exactly.
We see that in Job 2. He has to go to God
and ask permission.
Right. To do what he does to Job.
Yeah.
And God has to approve of it. Every little detail of what Satan does to Job, he has to first have prior authorization from God. He's not equal to God.
Right.
He doesn't get to pull things over on God. And it's not some cosmic battle between good and evil, between God and Satan. God's already won. God has always been in control.
True.
So, we definitely have to say that right up front. We'll start with ghosts.
We're starting with ghosts.
So, what is a ghost? Just define it real quick.
So, a ghost, I would say, is just a spirit, disembodied or an angel. Maybe the people are saying it is, but that's basically a ghost. It's just a non-material entity being.
Yeah, if you turn on ghost hunters or something like that, they'll talk about it as an entity.
Right.
There's an entity, and from what I've seen on TV shows and stuff like that, they always refer to them as a lost soul or a trapped soul. Someone who was trapped in between earth and heaven, or someone who has unfinished business.
Yeah, or someone that died prematurely.
Right.
And so their spirit is lingering because
they have unfinished work.
And it was a tragedy. Their death was a tragedy and stuff like that. So it's not at peace yet, which is the rest in peace kind of stuff too.
Right.
So that soul is not at peace yet.
Right.
So it's hanging around.
Right.
Haunting people.
That's essentially how we would define a ghost, as referred to by culture.
Right.
Not from a Christian worldview, from a cultural
just a general
perspective.
Understanding.
Yeah. There are shows like Ghost Whisperer, Casper the Friendly Ghost, all these different shows that we love watching or grew up watching or whatever. What do you think about that? What do you think about, can a spirit be caught between this life and the next?
Well, I think the Bible emphatically teaches us that human spirits, since we are a spirit body being, that's what the Bible teaches, that our spirit does not hang around. There's no limbo, there's no uneasiness like that. Hebrews 9:27 tells us right away that for it is appointed man to die and then the judgment and then face judgment. So there is a immediate,
you die and immediately
you're before the face of God.
Yeah, you answer to God.
Yeah, there's no wandering around. There's no wandering around earth and haunting people and checking up on people or bringing curses on people or chilling in a house or a field wherever you died or something like that. It's from that moment you are before the face of God.
Right. Before
the throne of God.
Right. We can talk about this, but even to believe that God could lose a soul would be to strip God of his omnipotence.
Yeah, exactly.
That belief, in just believing that, you are stripping God away from some of his non-communicable attributes.
Exactly. And that's completely unbiblical, I mean, not only are we told that he doesn't lose any of his, but even those who reject God and are justly sent to hell after they die are still under the control of God. They're still under his sovereignty and control. There's no...
Well, because they have to face judgment. That's what it said in Hebrews. There's a judgment that they have to face, and so there's no escaping that judgment.
Yeah.
Or else, and I guess another thing you could say is if you could escape that judgment, then God's justice could also be thwarted to some extent. You could stay God's hand in judgment, at least temporarily.
Yeah. Which the Bible rejects.
Yeah,
there's just no teaching of some wild stallions that are just outside of his skill to go grab and to tame and to come do his purposes or anything like that.
Right, exactly. I guess there's an assumption, too, for someone who believes in ghosts, and even if they're non-Christians, they believe that there's a soul in a human, which is a Christian belief. They have to borrow from our worldview, which is interesting because some people would deny the existence of God, but affirm that a person can have a soul and therefore be a ghost. Mm-hmm. Kind of mixing your belief system a little bit.
Right. So the next one we're going to talk about is extraterrestrial
activity.
In order to believe in life on other planets and this kind of stuff, you got to believe in an evolutionary worldview and not a God-wrought ex nihilo creation.
There's no creation of a being superior to us outside of those angels.
Right.
That's what the Bible clearly says.
And even if you want to come back and say, well, it's not a superior being, it's under us. We're still told in Genesis what God created. Everything. And it was all good.
Right.
And very good. And that's it. You are going outside of Scripture to say, well, there might be this out there. It's just not. That doesn't jive with the biblical story of creation.
Right, because in creation, he lays out what he created on each and every day. And never once is there a mention of life created anywhere else. You know, in Scripture, we don't have every single creature that was created. That's true. But we see types of creatures. We see birds. We see fish, creatures that dwell in the sea. We see humans. We see different types of animals, and never once is there referred to a being that lives in the heavens.
Yeah, the only other beings we ever see are angels, who are around the throne of God and are messengers of God and all that kind of stuff.
And there are weird Christian cults that say, when you look at, especially different types of prophecy and apocalyptic, scriptures and stuff, that they say, well, see those creatures that are being discussed in Ezekiel 1 or whatever, those are alien creatures. And we're saying, now you're conflating angels with aliens. I think you get into some dangerous water there.
Yeah, well, not only does Ezekiel say they're living creatures and angels who are around the throne, which multiple places in the Bible, the angels around the throne are called living creatures and described in very similar ways as they are in the beginning of Ezekiel. But I think you nailed it on the head with just saying, like, we are told what is created and it's here. And then man is created here, and this is where God has worked through man and through history to bring about his glory and to bring about redemption and all that kind of stuff. And it's just absent from the Bible, life on other planets or life on other places in this heavens and earth. When the Bible often talks about heavens and earth, it's talking about our globe and then all the stars and the planets out there. It's not talking about like where God dwells and then down here. Heavens and earth is our globe, earth, and then all the different galaxies and constellations and planets and stars that are out there. So he's a God of heaven and earth, and we are the only people he is said to have created and loved and redeemed and made covenants with and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And I have heard people say things like, well, we don't know all the different creatures that God created. We're still discovering species. And that's true. It's true. We don't know every species that was ever created and that God made, but we know kinds, and this is where you can kind of get into some Ken Ham kind of stuff, but there are types, there are kinds, and we see God creates kinds, and they're mentioned in Scripture. So when God created the cell and the nucleus and all that kind of stuff, does it say that God created the cell in Scripture? Does it say that God created plasma and all the... No, it doesn't say that, but it says that God created man. It says that God created woman in his image. So everything that's in a man or in a woman, we know by default that God created then. So just because we haven't discovered all the wonders of the human body just yet, we still know that God created the human body.
Right.
In John 1:3, it says, all things were made through him, and without him, not anything made was made. Right there, it very explicitly says that God is the creator. Everything that has ever been made has been made by God.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else.
Right. The other thing is the animals we're told were made, and those are here. Also, man is the only being that was made in the image of God and which God breathed life into. That's here. So even if the aliens we imagine that are out on the planet and they have moral aptitude and do right and wrong, or they're amoral and that's why they're so terrifying. But all this kind of stuff is obviously reminiscent of an image bearer. You know.
Well, they always refer to them as intelligent life forms.
Yeah.
You know, we assume they have decision-making capabilities. And that is something that Christians believe is only given to humans. The ability to make moral decisions. And we have a soul, and there's something stamped on us that was not stamped on any other living creature. Because we were made in the image of God. And I think a lot of times we want to believe there's an intelligent life form, and they have the same value, if not more, because they're more intelligent and they're higher evolved and all these things.
So I think that's something that's really funny about alien movies, and usually people's conceptions about aliens is they're always thousands of years ahead of us in technology, and they have types of metals that we don't have, and they have weapons we don't have, and they can blow up our entire planet with one shot of their gun from their mothership, and it's always this.
They're never pioneers in like the 1850s.
Yeah, we never imagine like some Martians in a wagon just like trudging along the sand of Mars or something, like looking for water.
Right.
I just
Martian
think that's kind of
gold
funny.
rush.
But I think it's part of what we want. We're projecting kind of like what we value
and aspire to.
We aspire to great feats of technology and advancement, and on a purely creative aspect, that's cool. I mean, you know, we have fantasy stories, and Tolkien came up with some really great stuff, even with ghosts and spirits of people, and
well, he even had the screw tape letters, which is like demons talking to each other, and so we're not saying that all literature or all...
Yeah, it's like unbiblical or ungodly to talk about it at all, or to...
No, but you do need to sit down and think about how your beliefs match up with Scripture.
Yeah. We'll get a little bit more into that when we go back through. So, extraterrestrial does not jive with God as creator of this heavens and earth.
Psychics. This will be like our last category.
Yeah.
So this would be, like we said earlier, this would be like a Ouija board, this would be a palm reader, this would be clairvoyance,
mediums
sorcery,
of all sorts.
Yeah, anything like that, which, you know,
what's the
witchcraft.
What's the drawing one? Where they're like overtaken by spirits, like...
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like the drawing one.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's that, tarot cards.
Yep.
Whatever.
There's all kinds of weird stuff. Voodoo.
And there's voodoo.
Don't do voodoo.
So I think we'll have to just come back around to this one. I think people know pretty much what we're talking about with this one. But we can come back around to this one and show what the Bible has to teach us about this. In Exodus
22:18 and in Leviticus 20:27, this is where the law of God clearly says that if someone is practicing sorcery or witchcraft, divinations, whatever word you want to use, that they should be put to death. And he even says that their blood is on their own hands.
Wow.
So this is one of the few paranormal things that I think is, I don't want to say real, because I don't believe it as they would perceive what it is.
But it's obviously very serious.
It's serious, and Scripture addresses it as serious as a problem, because it's if you practice these things, you should be put to death in the law. And it says even in Galatians 5:20, Paul lists it as like basically one of the works of the flesh.
Right, sorcery.
Yep.
Sorcerers are those who will not inherit the kingdom.
Right. So we would say that because this is listed in Scripture as like a real thing, we believe it's demonic.
Well, and Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians how behind idols are demons.
Right, and that's essentially what it is. It's idolatry. And it's a way for you to believe you can predict the future, even...
access knowledge that you're not supposed to.
Right, even in the Old Testament when... was it Saul who consulted an oracle?
Yeah. Instead of going to the Lord, instead of going to the prophet.
Right. It's a way that we can try and take the future into our own hands, I think. You know?
Right, and that's probably why it's so serious to God, because It takes away from trusting and putting our faith in Him.
Right.
And trusting our own
It's a breaking
ability.
of the first commandment, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that mean that every time someone gets their palm read or their cards read or whatever, that you're communicating with the demonic world? I don't think so. I think sometimes it's just some old crazy lady in a wig and some gaudy makeup.
Trying to make some money.
Trying to make a buck, yeah.
But you should be put to death, though.
Oh, my word.